My name is Dr. Sarah Mitchell, and I held top secret clearance with the Department of Defense for 23 years before everything I knew about reality was fundamentally shattered in ways I'm still processing 2 years later. I was the lead astrophysicist at a classified research facility, someone who had dedicated my entire adult life to understanding the universe through mathematics and observable phenomena. I believed in science, in provable facts, in the rational order of things. I was skeptical of conspiracy theories and government cover-up stories because I worked inside the system and saw how bureaucratic and frankly incompetent most classified operations actually were behind the Hollywood mystique. Nothing prepared me for what I would encounter 30 stories below the Nevada desert, in a place that officially doesn't exist on any map or architectural blueprint you could ever find. Area 51 is real, obviously, despite decades of government denial that became a kind of inside joke among those of us with clearance. What most people don't know is that Area 51 isn't a single facility, but rather a massive complex of interconnected underground installations spreading across miles of restricted desert, each level going deeper and containing progressively more classified research. The public mythology focuses on aliens and recovered spacecraft, fueled by decades of carefully managed disinformation campaigns designed to make anyone talking about the real work there sound insane. The truth is that yes, we studied recovered technology of non-terrestrial origin, but that work happened at levels 1 through 3 and honestly wasn't nearly as interesting as popular culture made it seem. Most of it was reverse engineering propulsion systems and material science that were maybe a few hundred years ahead of human technology, but still comprehensible within our existing physics frameworks. The real secrets, the things that kept me awake at night even before I knew what they were, existed far below that at levels most personnel didn't even know existed. I had worked at Area 51 for 11 years before I received clearance to access Level 7. The security protocols to get there were absurd even by classified facility standards. Biometric scans, retinal verification, dental pattern matching, and a psychological evaluation every single time you descended past Level 4. They were looking for any deviation from baseline mental state, any indication that you might be compromised or unstable or liable to talk about what you were about to see. The elevator down took 20 minutes, during which you stood alone in a metal box with no phone signal, no communication, just descending into darkness while your ears popped from the pressure changes. When the doors finally opened on Level 7, the first thing that hit you was the smell. It wasn't unpleasant exactly, more like ozone mixed with something organic and wrong, like the air itself had been contaminated by something that didn't belong in our reality. Level 7 was older than the rest of the facility, much older. The architecture was different, not the sterile, modern construction of the upper levels, but something that looked almost ancient despite being deep underground. The walls had this strange texture, smooth but with patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. The lighting was dim and had a slightly greenish tint that made everyone look sick and exhausted regardless of how they actually felt. There were maybe 30 personnel with Level 7 clearance total, scientists and military officers who had been carefully vetted over years and subjected to psychological conditioning I didn't fully understand at the time. We signed documents acknowledging that we could be detained indefinitely without trial if we ever spoke about our work there. We understood that our families could be monitored. We accepted that we were essentially owned by the project for the rest of our lives, and we did this willingly because we were told that what we were protecting was vital to national security and possibly to the survival of humanity itself. The first briefing I received on Level 7 came from General Marcus Webb, a man who looked like he hadn't slept properly in about a decade. His hands shook slightly when he opened the classified files, and I noticed he avoided making direct eye contact when he spoke. He explained that in 1968, during deep geological surveys for potential nuclear test sites, a team had discovered an anomaly 37 stories underground. Initial readings suggested it was a massive cavity, a natural cave system perhaps, but when they actually broke through, they found something that defied every geological principle we understood. It was a chamber, artificial, constructed from materials that analysis showed were approximately 3.7 million years old. But it wasn't the age that was most disturbing. It was what the chamber contained and what had apparently been waiting there in the dark for longer than modern humans have existed as a species. General Webb showed me photographs that my brain initially refused to process correctly. At first, I thought I was looking at some kind of archaeological dig site, ancient ruins perhaps, but as he explained what I was actually seeing, my skin went cold despite the climate-controlled temperature of the briefing room. The chamber contained hundreds of pods, cylindrical containers made from that same ancient, unknown material, arranged in perfect geometric patterns across the enormous space. And inside those pods, visible through transparent sections, were bodies. Not alien bodies in the typical gray humanoid sense that popular culture had imagined. These were human bodies, anatomically identical to modern Homo sapiens, wearing clothing and possessing technology that dated them to various periods of human history. There were individuals in ancient Egyptian ceremonial dress, medieval knights in full armor, Victorian-era scholars, World War II soldiers, and, disturbingly, dozens of people in modern clothing from the past 50 years, people who had been reported missing, whose disappearances had been investigated and ultimately filed away as cold cases. The implication was immediate and horrifying. Someone or something had been systematically harvesting humans throughout our entire recorded history and storing them in this underground facility that predated human civilization itself. The chamber had its own power source, still functioning after millions of years, maintaining the pods in some kind of stasis that our best scientists couldn't replicate or even fully understand. But the truly disturbing part, the part that made several members of the research team request psychiatric leave, was that the bodies weren't dead. Medical scans showed minimal brain activity, like they were in some form of suspended animation or deep coma. Their cells showed no signs of aging or decay, despite some of them having been in stasis for thousands of years. They were being preserved for something, collected like specimens in some vast experiment we couldn't comprehend. My role on the Level 17 was to analyze the mathematical patterns in how the pods were arranged and to study the technology powering the stasis systems. What I discovered over the following months made me question everything I thought I understood about human history and our place in the universe. The pod arrangement followed mathematical principles that wouldn't be discovered by human mathematicians for another 200 years based on our current trajectory. Whoever built this facility possessed knowledge of physics and mathematics far beyond our current understanding, yet they had been here, on Earth, below our feet, millions of years before the first humans evolved. The most unsettling theory, one that most of the team refused to even consider seriously, was that perhaps humans hadn't evolved naturally at all. Perhaps we were the experiment, carefully guided and cultivated by whoever built that chamber, with specimens collected periodically to study our development over millennia. We spent months trying to determine the origin of the chamber and its builders, analyzing every surface, every material, looking for any clue about who created it and why. The technology was so advanced that it might as well have been magic to us. We couldn't figure out the power source that had been running continuously for millions of years without any apparent fuel or maintenance. We couldn't replicate the material the pods were made from, which was harder than diamond, yet somehow flexible and self-repairing. We couldn't understand the stasis field that kept the human specimens preserved in perfect condition. Everything about the chamber suggested a level of technological advancement so far beyond human capability that it made our most sophisticated equipment look like stone tools in comparison. And that realization was deeply humbling and terrifying because it meant that Earth had been under observation, had been someone's laboratory, for far longer than we had existed as a species. The breakthrough came during my 8th month on level 7, though calling it a breakthrough feels wrong given what it revealed. I was analyzing energy signatures from the central hub of the chamber when I noticed something that had been dismissed by previous researchers as background radiation. It was a pattern repeating every 4.7 hours, like a pulse or heartbeat. When I filtered out all the other noise and isolated just that signal, I realized it was actually a countdown. Mathematical, precise, undeniable. The chamber wasn't just storing human specimens, it was waiting for something. And based on my calculations, that something was going to happen in approximately 7 months from the date of my discovery. I presented my findings to General Webb and the senior research team during an emergency briefing that lasted 14 hours. The implications were debated, analyzed, and ultimately accepted as the most probable explanation for the chamber's purpose. It wasn't just a storage facility, it was a collection point, gathering human specimens across millennia, waiting until some predetermined condition was met, and we were rapidly approaching whatever that condition was. The military immediately began contingency planning for every scenario we could imagine, most of them absolutely terrifying. Was this chamber going to activate and release some kind of weapon? Was it a beacon that would summon whoever built it back to Earth? Were the preserved humans somehow going to be awakened and used for some purpose we couldn't fathom? General Webb pushed for sealing the entire chamber with a tactical nuclear device, destroying everything before the countdown reached 0. But the scientific team, myself included, argued that we needed to understand what was going to happen, that destroying it might trigger exactly what it was designed to do. The debate reached the highest levels of government, classified briefings for the president, and select members of congressional intelligence committees. In the end, the decision was made to maintain observation but prepare for the worst-case scenario. Level 7 was reinforced with additional security measures, kill switches that could seal and potentially destroy the chamber, and a failsafe that would collapse the entire facility if necessary. If you're fascinated by classified operations and hidden history, share your thoughts in the comments about what you think was really happening in that chamber. As we approached the calculated activation date, the atmosphere on Level 7 became increasingly tense. Additional personnel were brought in, including military special operations, who frankly looked uncomfortable with how little we could tell them about what they might be facing. The pods started showing increased activity about 2 weeks before the countdown reached 0. The energy signatures intensified, the stasis fields began fluctuating in ways that suggested they were preparing to deactivate, and most disturbingly, the preserved humans inside began showing signs of increased brain activity. Medical monitors detected what appeared to be REM sleep patterns, as if whatever had been dormant in their minds for centuries or even millennia was beginning to wake up. We established a secure perimeter around the chamber, with armed guards authorized to use lethal force if anything emerged that was deemed a threat. I personally thought it was absurd, like we were preparing for a zombie outbreak, but the government wasn't taking any chances with something this unknown. The day the countdown reached 0, every scientist, military officer, and government observer with clearance was present in the observation room overlooking the chamber. We watched through reinforced glass as the energy levels spiked dramatically, the lights in the chamber intensifying to almost blinding levels. The pods simultaneously began opening, their transparent sections folding away with mechanical precision that was beautiful and terrifying. And then, one by one, the preserved humans inside began to wake up. They opened their eyes, looked around in confusion, and started emerging from their pods with movements that seemed coordinated, despite the fact that they came from different time periods and couldn't possibly have known each other. An Egyptian priestess stood next to a Roman centurion. A medieval peasant woman conversed in some unknown language with a Victorian gentleman. A World War II pilot embraced a woman in 1950s clothing they couldn't possibly have known. It was chaos and impossible, and nothing like what we had expected. What happened next will haunt me until the day I die. The awakened humans didn't attack or try to escape, or show any signs of distress you would expect from people who had been in stasis for potentially thousands of years. Instead, they all turned simultaneously to face the same direction, toward the back wall of the chamber that we had always assumed was solid. That wall, which had shown no signs of being anything other than ancient construction, suddenly began to dissolve or transform, revealing a passage that definitely hadn't existed in any of our scans or surveys. The passage led deeper underground, further than any of our equipment had detected, descending at a steep angle into darkness that our lights couldn't fully penetrate. And the awakened humans simply began walking down that passage, single file, like they were being called by something none of us could hear. General Webb ordered troops to follow them, to see where they were going, but every soldier who tried to enter that passage reported feeling overwhelming dread and physical illness. Several collapsed and had to be carried out. Whatever was down there didn't want us following. We watched the last of the awakened humans disappear into that passage, hundreds of people from across human history walking calmly into an unknown depth beneath Area 51. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the passage sealed itself, the wall reforming like it had never been broken. We scanned the area extensively afterward and found no trace of the passage, no hollow spaces beyond that wall, nothing to indicate where those people had gone. They had simply vanished into the earth, taking with them any answers about who had collected them and why. The pods remained open and empty, the chamber's power source finally beginning to show signs of depletion after completing whatever function it had been designed for. Within 24 hours, the entire facility went dark for the first time in millions of years, leaving us with an enormous underground chamber full of ancient technology that no longer worked and absolutely no explanation for what we had witnessed. The government's response was immediate and predictable. Level 7 was sealed. All documentation was classified beyond top secret under a designation I'm not permitted to name. Every person who witnessed the event was debriefed extensively, subjected to additional psychological evaluation, and basically threatened with consequences we couldn't imagine if we ever spoke about what we had seen. The official story, the one that stays buried in files that will never be declassified, was that the chamber was some kind of ancient human civilization's attempt at time preservation, a cultural project gone wrong. But none of us believed that. The technology was too advanced, the purpose too deliberate, the selection of humans too specific across too many time periods. Someone or something had been actively collecting humans throughout our history, preserving them in stasis for millions of years, waiting for some condition to be met before awakening them and taking them somewhere deeper than we could follow. I left government service 6 months after the Level 7 incident, taking early retirement despite being only 49 years old. I couldn't continue working in a system that was hiding something this significant from humanity. The question that keeps me awake at night isn't about aliens or ancient civilizations or advanced technology. It's much simpler and much more terrifying. If someone was collecting humans as specimens for millions of years, are they still collecting? How many people who disappear every year, whose cases go cold, whose bodies are never found, are actually being taken by whatever built that chamber? And what happened to those people who walked down into the depths beneath Level 7? Were they returned to their original time periods? Were they transported somewhere else entirely? Are they part of some vast experiment that spans millions of years of Earth's history? We have no answers, only questions that multiply the more you think about them. The most disturbing detail, something I discovered only after leaving the program, is that the chamber beneath Area 51 might not be unique. There are geological anomalies detected in at least 7 other locations around the world, places where deep scans show similar energy signatures and artificial cavities far deeper than any human construction should exist. These sites are all under government control or in remote locations that are heavily restricted. China has one beneath the Tibetan Plateau. Russia has one in Siberia. There's one under the Antarctic ice that was detected during a geological survey in 2003. If these are all chambers like the one beneath Area 51, if they all contain preserved humans from across history, then the scope of whatever is happening is far larger than anyone imagined. It's not just a singular event, but a systematic, global operation that has been ongoing for longer than human civilization has existed. We are not the masters of this planet. We might not even be its original inhabitants. We might simply be the latest iteration of something that has been here much, much longer. I'm sharing this now because I believe people deserve to know the truth, or at least as much of the truth as I can tell without being immediately detained. The government will deny everything. They'll say I'm delusional or seeking attention or suffering from some kind of mental break. But I have documentation, though I can't share the most classified parts without putting people in danger. I have witness statements from other Level 7 personnel who are willing to confirm these events happened, even if they can't speak publicly. And I have the certainty that comes from seeing something impossible with your own eyes, something that fundamentally changes how you understand reality. What we discovered at Area 51, Level 7, wasn't aliens. It wasn't recovered spacecraft or reverse-engineered technology or any of the science fiction scenarios popular culture has imagined. It was something far more disturbing. Evidence that humanity has been under observation and possibly under control for millions of years by something we still don't understand. And whatever that something is, it's still out there, still collecting, still waiting for something we can't predict or prevent. The question isn't whether the government is hiding things from the public. Obviously they are, as any government does for legitimate security reasons. The real question is what else they're hiding. What other discoveries have been made in places like Level 7 that fundamentally challenge our understanding of human history and our place in the universe? I spent my entire career believing that science would eventually explain everything, that given enough time and research, we would understand all the mysteries of existence through rational observation and mathematical proof. What I learned on Level 7 is that there are some things that exist outside our frameworks of understanding, phenomena that don't fit into our scientific models because they were created by intelligence so far beyond ours that we might as well be ants trying to understand nuclear physics. And the most terrifying part is that this intelligence, whatever it is, views us not as equals or even as potential threats, but as subjects, as specimens to be collected and studied, and ultimately taken somewhere for purposes we can't even begin to imagine. I've been followed since going public with parts of this story. Nothing obvious or threatening, just the subtle awareness that my communications are monitored, my movements tracked, my contacts investigated. They want to know who I'm talking to, what I'm sharing, how much of the truth I'm willing to reveal. So far, I've been careful, staying just on the right side of what would trigger immediate action against me. But I'm getting older, and I've accepted that I probably don't have many years left before they decide I'm too much of a liability. When that time comes, when I receive the visit that I know is inevitable, I want to make sure this information is out there, preserved in whatever way possible, so that future researchers and truth seekers have some direction in understanding what's really beneath our feet. Level 7 was sealed, but the chamber is still there, dormant now, but potentially waiting for another activation cycle. The preserved humans are gone, but the question of where they went and why remains unanswered. And somewhere, in 7 other locations around this planet, similar chambers might be holding similar secrets, waiting for their own countdown to reach 0. If this story sounds impossible, if you're skeptical of everything I've claimed, I understand completely. I would have been skeptical too before I saw it with my own eyes, before I spent 8 months analyzing technology that shouldn't exist, and watching security footage of people from across history waking up from stasis. The human mind naturally rejects information that doesn't fit into existing belief systems, a psychological defense mechanism against cognitive dissonance. But sometimes the impossible is actually true. Sometimes conspiracy theories are just truth that hasn't been officially acknowledged yet. Sometimes the government really is hiding things so significant that revealing them would fundamentally alter how humanity sees itself and its history. Level 7 was one of those things, and I believe there are more, far more, waiting to be discovered or waiting to reveal themselves when whatever timeline they're operating on determines the moment is right. We are not alone on this planet, and we never have been. But what shares this world with us isn't extraterrestrial. It's something older, something that was here long before humans evolved, something that might have been instrumental in that evolution itself. And that truth is infinitely more disturbing than any alien invasion scenario Hollywood has ever imagined. Leave a comment with your theories about what happened to those awakened humans, or what other secrets might be hidden in classified facilities around the world.